Beetle diversity in real life as opposed to ones with laser saws.
Does anyone know where I can get one of those Lalogi orbs with a virtual family tree popping out of it?
Love it. Those topics and more on BioTrekkie with the Admiral, starting now. Welcome back to BioTrekkie with the Admiral. I'm Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant for the Star Trek universe.
And I'm Jayne Brook, and I played Admiral Katrina Cornwell in the first 2 seasons of Discovery, and I'm here to discuss biology on season 4 with Mohamed, my friend Mohamed. Yay. So, Mohamed, we are already into episodes 5 and 6. It's going by really, really quickly. Yeah. What are some of the 3 things that popped out at you over the course of these 3 episodes?
Sure thing. So first in episode 5, I was very interested in those beetles. So they had a name for them initially, but then it turned out that they were robots. But it just got me thinking about beetle diversity more generally and beetles here on Earth. There's a lot to say about that. Second has to do with that. There was a comment by Michael in Books. They were talking about the beetles, saying that, oh, no animal that's alive is that specific in their actions. I want to talk a little bit about animal behavior a little bit more generally and a concept called fixed action patterns. It's a slightly old concept, but a really interesting one. And the last one, this is now from episode 6, after a book got, zapped.
Fried.
They talked about his neuronal firing rates, and they mentioned some numbers there. So I had some fun looking up something. I'm not a neurobiologist at all, but I had some fun looking up some specifics about that to see what is a normal neuronal firing rate. So those are my 3 things, I think.
Wonderful. It's funny because I'll tell everybody when we do these BioTrekkies, Mohamed and I watch these shows, and then we talk, before we record the show. Okay, what jumped out at you? But as I was watching number 5, I thought, oh yeah, here, okay, we have a beetle, and then it turned into a robot. So I thought, oh, Mohamed won't have anything to say about that. But then I didn't realize, of course, we could talk about real beetles.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I won't recognize something as a discussion topic, and so that's a cool thing.
Yeah, that works the other way.
How you pull it out,
That works that way too. You often pick up things on the theme where I'm just like, oh yeah, they did talk about that. I was just eating it up just as a naive person.
Right, different expertise. So yeah. So I was curious about these beetles, and that was the first thing I was going to ask you about when I started watching episode 5. So tell us about that.
Yeah. Sure, absolutely. So interestingly, 25%, so a quarter of all known animals are beetles.
Get out. You mean from humans all the way down to insects?
Yeah, well, for including everything. We're talking about like tapeworms, we're talking about things which are not insects. If you look at all animal life, a quarter of them are beetles, which is really shocking. It's like 400,000 described species of beetles. There's a famous quote by this biologist named JBS Haldane saying, if there's a creator, I know that he must have an inordinate fondness for beetles because there's so many of them out there.
I'm so glad to know that. That is a cool fact.
Right? Yeah, no. And it's interesting to wonder why that's the case. So there a lot of scientists study why there are so many beetles. And there's 2 potential explanations associated with this. One is that they have a high rate of species formation. And part of this might be because they tend to be feeding on these flowering plants. They don't get around a lot. And part of what allows for more speciation is reduced mixing. So maybe this association with flowering plants helped with that. The other thing is that it seems like a lot of beetle lineages have very low rates of extinction, which is actually really cool. So yeah, it's pretty shocking just how abundant these things are everywhere.
Now, here's a question I have for you.
Sure.
Do biologists track which species of beetle, I mean, is the oldest? Like you said, they don't go extinct. So could we say that this kind of beetle has been around since the dinosaur age, but this kind of beetle popped into existence, we think, in the 1700s?
It's tough because the way we define species makes that a little bit hard, because at that point, if you're looking at fossil evidence, you're looking at something which, I mean, a lot of the beetles may be different species in the sense that they don't interbreed, but like if you're just looking at this like preserved fossil specimen, I mean, it's sometimes hard to tell, but they do their best. They do their best just in terms of overall change. The the beetle that we saw in the show looked a little bit, not exactly, but it looked a little bit like what's referred to as a rhinoceros beetle. You may have seen it has that sort of front horn and on the top and on the bottom. It looked a little bit like that. I didn't actually get a very good view of it because it was moving around a little bit. It may have been animated or in some way. I'm not sure. There was a nice reference in there. I don't know if you remember where Michael referred to the sound being made by chitin, which is the polysaccharide that's on their cuticle. And that is it's a very, very hard.
I did not catch that.
Yeah. Book was like, I don't know what you just said. So, I love that. Those things can be super tough. There's actually a particular beetle I looked up that is called the ironclad beetle that can literally be run over by a car and survive.
And it's this big.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know exactly how big, but it's small. Yeah. But they're really cool. And not surprising, there's a ton of diverse ecologies. Different beetles live in different environments. You know, some less pleasant than others. Like you can imagine what the dung beetle uses.
Yes, famous dung beetle.
Yeah, but it was just neat seeing beetles represented after that. Like, yes, we're seeing, we haven't seen that many insects. We did see, I guess, an insect in the first episode of season 3. You might remember the
I do remember. It was really cool.
We talked about that at the time too, I think. But it's nice to see a beetle gets represented in there, even if it wasn't in this case an actual living one. But they referred to the Akali something beetle, which is the species that the humanoid species that was there. Then presumably they brought it over. By the way, that's just random Trek continuity thing. The Akali, the individuals that are there actually were found in the series Enterprise. They had similar markings on their foreheads too. So that wasn't new to Discovery. That was actually a bring back alien species.
That's very cool. Yeah, okay.
Not beetle related. But.
I am really I cannot believe 25% of all
animals,
creatures, everything.
Yeah. No, animals specifically, not including fungi or plants or anything, but animals.
No, animal.
But includes sponges, includes worms, includes crustaceans, stunning. Includes vertebrates, like 25% beetles. Wow.
That is a cool thing I'm taking away from this episode. So I do remember when Book said, it has to be a robot because no living thing moves with such precision. Yeah. But you have something to say to Book about that.
Yeah. So there's a concept that goes back to some of the founders of the study of animal behavior. So this like Nico Tinbergen, Conrad Lorenz, folks like that. That's referred to as a fixed action pattern. So what that is it's kind of like a reflex, but expanded. If you imagine it's a complex behavior, it's triggered by some sort of external cue, which could be somebody walking up to it, for example, and it goes to completion once it's triggered. So that's what a fixed action pattern is. And there are known examples of this. I mean, the classic one that, for example, that I believe Nico Tinbergen worked on is, I don't know if you remember, herring gulls have like a little red spot on their bills. And they'll come and they'll kind of peck it near the ground, and then their chicks will then peck on that red spot, and that causes the herring gulls to immediately regurgitate their food into the chick's mouth.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's absolutely stereotyped. Like this will work almost every time. And we know what the trigger is. Like a red dot that size. If you paint something like that, the chicks will peck at that. And it's not learned. It's not something they like learn from their moms, but it's just this.
It's just something they do.
Exactly, something that's just kind of programmed in there. And this is especially common, I think, at least in insects. I should say that term is a little bit dated now. I think some people think things are a little bit more complex, and there tends to be more environmental inputs to things. Fair enough, but it's interesting. So I talk about this all the time with my son when we go for walks. That I say, like, if you see an insect, it's kind of like its brain is essentially the equivalent of a short computer program.
and that's the whole thing. Yeah. That it's on a loop.
Yeah,
maybe.
Exactly. And like, if this, then that, and there's a whole bunch of those things. And there's a little bit of random elements to it too. And some of the ifs may have to do with external inputs. Like, right. if you hear this sound, walk in that direction, so, a classic one is there's a moth that when it hears the bat shriek coming at it, it lifts its leg that actually makes the wing get disrupted in the flapping, so then it just plummets,
so that the bat can't.
Exactly. So it drops out of the way when the bat's trying to catch it. But again, it's this if then statements, and it's interesting to think about that. We probably are kind of like that too. We just have much longer programs than a lot of insects.
Well, yeah, because this does spark in me that we think too much sometimes, and we interfere with what might be a natural and survival response to something. Yeah. And there are many stories of people who are in danger or something's coming at them, and without thinking, boom, they catch something, or they move out of the way, or they, they get out of the way of a psychopath or something. But there are,
The buffalo
if we
chasing
don't
them.
think too much, you
Yeah.
know, I think we have these responses as well. I think we
Yeah.
just interfere with them, especially in the West.
It's complicated too, because we have it both ways. I agree with you with what you just said. Additionally, I'd say that we've changed our environment so much that some of the things that had been, successful programs may now not be so successful. So for example, our love of sugar, we love sugar, right? But there's a reason we love sugars. We need energy. But now that, I could go downstairs and eat like
Now
this,
that you can go downstairs
granulated sugar container. That would be
we have a problem with
ridiculous.
diabetes, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So some of those
And
things
some of
are-
the things we're afraid of, we no longer need to be afraid. And we
Yeah.
also, we have anxiety levels that are high.
Exactly. And sometimes our programs just get messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. We
That's
gotta-
why, it's fine to take
Yes.
medication. I always say that this is one of the things that there's a little bit of a stigma for taking medication for like psychological issues. I would say it's no different than your it's no different than your stomach hurting. It's just like X is messed up in your body. Just fix it.
Right.
Do it, right? There's no problem with that.
Right.
So, but I thought it was interesting to think about that in connection to Zora, who is a computer program who's having
She needs a little bit of anxiety medicine or something.
Yeah.
It's funny
Just a
with
little bit of a
Zora. I
fix
mean,
of
we're
some
jumping
sort.
ahead a little bit and we'll go back to the
Sure.
behavior thing, but Zora is funny. Because when I was watching her, I thought, what an interesting concept that AI comes close to humans. And, but, she needs to be sent to a spa and we need to, get that bug out of her so that our computer
Yeah.
doesn't give us trouble. That was an interesting concept.
It was an
But,
interesting concept.
I don't know if you finished with the behavior, so
No, that's
what you're
basically
saying
it.
is you can't interrupt that behavior pattern. Once the stimulus comes, you can't really interrupt it.
Well, I mean, it's not normally interrupted. I think you can physically interrupt it, but I think it's
Right.
not. It normally would just proceed all the way. Now, it's
But they'll
possible that
play
it's possible
out
that there's
and-
extra things that would then overrule that program as it's
Right.
going. The Control C equivalent. for the
So what
computer.
you're saying is when Book looked at that beetle and said, no, it has to be a robot. Nothing in life moves with that precision. You're
Yeah,
saying
not
that's not
necessarily.
exactly true.
Not necessarily. Exactly. It was a nice idea, and fair enough. Book is not an entomologist. I mean,
Right.
So don't fault him.
He's
by
a
any
lot
means,
of
but
things, but he's not an entomologist.
He's not an
Right.
entomologist. Yeah, I don't think he would portray himself as one.
Right.
There's a common sci-fi
That's
thing in
interesting.
general, though, that this is only tangentially related, but I always like to reinforce that point. There's often this conflation of life and sentience, or how things think in sci-fi, where this doesn't have to do with the Beatles specifically, but just more generally. Like when we talk often about searching for life extraterrestrially, people often think like, oh, looking for like a spaceship flying by, like,
Yeah,
it
we're
could
looking
also
for a
just be this
Martian. Yeah.
it could be a microbe
ET.
sitting in a pool of water someplace.
Right.
Anyway, but that's a little bit of an aside, but I just wanted to mention that too, because that comes up a lot. But that was all I had to say on the behavior front.
On the Beatles and that
Yeah.
movement. And so sticking with Book and
Mhm.
going into episode 6,
Yeah.
when he then says, I'll do the jump, I'll
Yes.
do it. And he goes in there and something just completely all that energy comes through and he gets kind of fried. So
Yeah.
talk to us about neuronal firing.
Yeah. So the quote there was, the Quajon have a cortical dream center firing at 400 times per second, or times per second is the same as hertz. So, and they said that Book's was 10 times that high. So I'm not a neurobiologist at all. They said that, I was like, is that high? I don't know. Is that high? I have no idea. So I looked this up. I have some notes here. If you don't mind my looking at that. So the reality is there here on Earth, and especially among, say, like humans and mice, which have been studied a ton in this regard, there's huge variance among neurons in how fast they fire. Right now, some will spike at less than 1 cycle per second. So that's Books is like dramatically higher than that.
Right.
But most of them tend to be kind of slow, like not necessarily 1 cycle, but low end. There are, though, in human brain cortexes, these cortical fast spiking neurons, and they peak around a couple of hundred hertz. So in terms of the firing rate, so okay, kudos to the discovery writers that they looked that up, and that is consistent, at least with some of the fastest ones in your cortex. Now, the firing rate changes based on what you're doing. They tend to be, not surprisingly, a little bit slower when you're asleep. It's different with different kinds of sleep. So like with REM sleep, REM sleep, that's the one where you're actually dreaming too. Yeah, you see it much higher in the neocortex than in other parts, like in, say, for example, the hippocampus, other parts of the brain there. But I would say it's a little bit of an oversimplification the way it was presented in the episode of just referring to neuronal firing rates, because it's obviously like his different neurons would be a little bit different. On the other hand, like he clearly had a very specific problem. So, in this case, the doctor probably just wasn't giving too much detail. Again, he's not giving a talk at a medical conference. He's just talking to a patient. So totally fair. Totally fair.
So you're saying those numbers, though, are different with each human being at different times of their day.
Correct.
Probably
and
at
among
different
neurons
phases
too.
of life as well. They might get
totally.
slower, and it's probably faster in someone like, I don't know, a real genius than it might be in a 5-year-old or something, or no?
I've heard it's slower potentially in people with depression. I've heard that before. I'm not sure if that's true.
That would make sense. Yeah.
But I'm not sure about genius versus. I'm not sure if that has
genius versus ordinary person.
It might be just
around.
more connections as opposed to faster firing rates. I'm not sure about that.
Okay,
but that actually leads to an interesting question in the sense, like, what does this firing rate mean? Is it like the rate of the signal going across? Because a neuron is a cell. Is it the rate going across the cell, or is it the rate between cells, or specifically like the rate at the junction, which is called a synapse? Mm-hmm. It's a little bit vague what that means, but at least the number they gave is within the range of what you would see in that part of the brain they should be looking at. So 2 thumbs up.
Good for them. Good for them.
So I thought that was pretty cool. And it was nice to see some like neurobiology. I will say Star Trek seems to love neurobiology, mostly in the context of diseases. There's almost always this like, oh, there's a neurological disease called blah. And there's so many Star Trek neurological diseases.
Right. So many things come out. And this, of course, gave them the opportunity to bring Book's father and accusations and guilt. And it was a jumping board for that storyline,
Absolutely. And I like that.
I love Book, by the way. I love that character. I love David Ajala. I just think he's such a good actor.
100% agree.
He's such a good actor. And this whole meaty storyline, is on his shoulders to carry the more universal storyline of pain and grief and, all of this.
Yeah.
Although the computer did carry a little bit of this guilt thing, and then that universal, they gave her on her shoulders this idea of you can't go forward when you somehow have to deal with the guilt so that you can go forward and all that. But
it seems like we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of that over the last couple of episodes, because we have Tilly was still upset in the very beginning about what happened there at the end of last season. We have Michael being upset at the end of the first episode about some of the people who got lost when they went to that space station that was spinning out of control. So there seems to be a lot of this, like people holding things and trying to recover. And poor Wilson, or Dr. Culber, he sees to be going through stuff as well. So
I liked that a lot. That was episode. I've got my notes here. Was that 5 or 6? That he had that Cronenberg had that great. I wrote notes monologue to him. That great. I thought that was great when he just real calmly did that whole monologue and said, you're asking yourself, why me? That whole survivor complex. But that whole idea, I think the writers always, bring in what they're seeing, they're dealing with, or they're seeing people deal with in life. And I think that's a huge question in life. You get to a certain point and you're saying, why am I here? I think everybody does that. Why am I here? And how can I contribute? And have I contributed? And it's a great weight if you feel that you haven't. I really appreciate these storylines where the characters are feeling, you bring up Wilson, the book has this grief, you see all of them, but the weight of wondering, have you given what you were meant to give? And it's probably always less than, you imagine you could, or well, this is a complete, we're taping this, everybody, on the day after Christmas. My family and I watched It's a Wonderful Life. You watch that one again. And I love that movie for that whole theme, which maybe they should have Wilson watch It's a Wonderful Life from 900 years ago.
I love that.
That's what they need. They need Wilson's character to watch It's a Wonderful Life to see how much he's affected, and there's a reason he survived that he might not even know. Wow, we just came up with it here. Wouldn't that be funny? That'd be so sweet if they were watching these old movies that humans used to make.
Yeah. There have been a couple of movies, remember last season, that every now and then they were watching some old movies too. So.
Oh yeah, so there you go. because that movie does address this idea. Well, we won't get into a whole talk about It's a Wonderful Life, but getting back to Star Trek. So we have our 3 biology themes. Once again, I always appreciate when they, this is the thing that you do, but I'm appreciating the way that they are taking themes that really resonate with me when I watch. I really love that. I did like that in episode 6, it seemed like a bottle show, a show where they take a breath and they're like, we're going to use the sets we have. We're going to use the actors we have. We're just going to take a breath, catch up with ourselves. And the thing that was nice about that is that bridge crew is performing in every episode so that Discovery can achieve what it achieves. We just don't always see them, but they're performing their jobs every episode. And it was nice in episode 6 that they had that screen time to be seen really contributing their smarts to, the conflict at hand. But I'm trying to think. That family tree, I mentioned that in the blurb. Oh my God, I love that thing. And the whole way it incorporates, the whole idea that family is, what's that saying? You're born with a family and then you later with friends choose your family. But I like the way that, you have this orb and this virtual tree grows out of it. Like, what if we all had that orb and we're having a bad day and we're feeling bad and we just take our little orb and the thing comes out and then all the faces of like family members and friends came. Oh my God, that would be somebody has to invent that. Like
totally.
And you
Ancestry DNA, we suggest to them.
And that if like pictures could be added of people that like you didn't even know, but they're like up in your tree. Oh, it'd be so cool. I want one of those.
I love that. Like you said, I love the interaction, not just of your actual blood family, but also just these people who've influenced your life in a positive way too.
Your soul family.
Yeah.
Because, we have a lot of times the members of our family, like sometimes we don't even know them very well and we don't spend any time, or we are moving away, or we spent a lot of time as children, but we don't anymore. And they're still part of our fabric of our being, but there are many people who aren't blood related who are
exactly
part of the fabric of our being. That's why I want one of these trees. Somebody make an orb, like whoop, it just like goes out in the air in front of you. I like that.
That would be epically cool. Epically cool.
But I'm sure I haven't looked at all my notes, but
I have a question for you about safety on set. Because I know in episode 6, there are all these sparks like flying all over the place, and Sonequa or Michael Burnham was like walking amidst them, things like that. I've seen that. Like I remember actually some of the episodes you were in, there were like a lot of sparks too.
A lot of sparks.
Yeah, I mean, could you comment about like safety, both in Star Trek and just more generally, like maybe some other shows too? Did you ever feel at risk or something like that? Of like,
I always felt like I was in really good hands, and that they took it very seriously. And it's a top not show, like it's not a show that's trying to cut corners, like who cares, let's just put a little fire over here, Sonequa will be fine. But it's so when they choreograph it, and they're real careful. I think it's the prop guys, I can't remember exactly, or it's the set guy. Special effects people do it, but they try to choreograph it very carefully to go off like a split second after the actor has gone by. Of course, sometimes, in the chaos of a shot, something will go off. I do remember sometimes sparks would drift down a little bit, and a couple even would hit my costume, but then you don't have to be afraid. I would feel more afraid for Gersha if something actually went through, burnt a costume, like the costume person. But also they're not like gonna kill you. I mean, they're not going to disfigure you. They float down, and you pretty much, they kind of watch the actors run, and they try to blow them just in a way that won't make you have it go right. And they blow it. You'll notice that they blow up real high. They don't have it blow up right in front of someone's face or anything. But we all know, and I don't even want to bring that sad story up, but we all know that sometimes people can get overconfident. It's like what parents are always children think parents are such a pain in the butt, because, well, I know my kids are like, let's come up with another, Jayne's possible tragedy that could happen. But, it's like, guys, I've been around a little bit longer than you, and things
Not
happen.
hypothetical.
So I think you just have to always take it real seriously that something could happen and then let it go. But as you say, on Star Trek, I always felt very sure that they were following all the protocols. There's very, very clear protocols that are supposed to be followed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we've had sad stories recently
Yeah.
where protocols were not followed and tragedy ensued. And that's really sad.
I heard, I think from one of the actors in one of the other previous, like the 1990 Star Trek series, that the shoes were really slippery sometimes. So
now that can be, I do have a friend who had an injury on a big movie. So it can, I mean, like life happens.
Yeah.
Life happens, you know? So they were rushing to get a shot and she had to walk in with a tea set. And so she didn't have her hands available. And the bottom of her shoes, it was like period piece. The bottom of her shoes were leather. You know, when I was growing up, we would always go out if we had leather shoes and you would rub them on the sidewalk to make it rough, you know, so that you wouldn't. And she did slide and fall and injured her knee. I mean, she's okay. But, so stuff happens in life. You can't.
No, it's fair. It's fair. I'm glad to hear that they take that they're really careful about it on Star Trek. That's
why you have to follow protocols because, you know, shit happens. But if you are following protocols, then you're going to protect people. Yeah.
And speaking of protocols, I'm sure there's a lot of COVID ones now. We see there's a whole screen of like COVID safety people on there.
Huge protocol for COVID. I mean, the main actors are probably tested every day. And and anyone close to them is tested 3 times a week. And then if you're only tested once a week, you can't come onto the set. But I can't think of, do you have any other questions? I would have to look through my notes and that would be boring for people to watch.
One other quick one is one my son was asking about. In episode 4. So, you know, Michael is, you know, out there, she's typing on this virtual screen. He was like, so are they just doing that in the air? I was like,
yes, you are.
Yeah. Is there any, like, do they adjust?
I'm trying to think because I had to do that a lot.
I figured.
I didn't think was anything. There was that one episode where I had all those words in the second season. Wasn't the second season or the first season? Maybe it was the first season. And I was having to point to things and be like, we had this, we had that. And then, do you know, tell your son that I watched that as well. And I watched like Tilly or anyone, you know, Anthony has to do it all the time. Wipe, you know, he has to be like, wipe, you know, wipe. And then I'm like, I always think to myself, the computer people have to like put it right near their hand.
Exactly. They're probably adjusting it relative to where your finger is.
No, I don't think there was anything there. It's kind of weird. You have to, I think you just have to do it in the air and they add the computer.
They don't say like, don't do it so deep, do it less. They don't say anything like that from the director.
No, I think they're really excellent at making it
work. They'll work with whatever works. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And probably the actors now having watched it so much, what the result is, they kind of, you do have in your mind. I mean, they'll tell you what you're looking at and what you're trying to achieve. So you know what you're doing. You just have to imagine. Yeah. But
that's very cool.
So fun. Yeah.
No, that was my last question.
Okay, good. Well, I look forward to the next 2.
Yeah, I know exactly. We got there's a mid-season break and then we'll pick up after that. So.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's right.
Well, thank you as always. It's always wonderful to chat with you, Jayne. And,
it always is.
And thanks to everybody who's watching. And tune in next time for the next episode of BioTrekkie with the Admiral. Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye.
Live long and prosper.
Left-handed again.